This is my viewfinder. There's something about it. I mean, you're right. Like, I overcomplicate everything, and I'm not even doing these conversations as a reflection of my own process. Although obviously it'll have an influence, because I definitely don't think about anything the correct way. But I mean, don't you find that? I mean, maybe not. Don't you? That's implication. But do you think that there's something in that? Like, does a photograph need to be seen, to have value, or can it sit as a negative if you're shooting film in a box and still be something?
Maybe with time, like I could look at a negative right now and be like, I don't want to print that. But then like 10 years down the road, it's like, oh, what was I thinking? It's...
What do you think the act of printing, like, who is that for?
Or, I don't know, man. It's for...
It's weird, right?
Whoever is printing.
Like when I think of, and I'm trying to get in touch with my friend, Bob from the coffee shop. Like he's a, published painter and artist, as well as had a full career as a day job. But we've had talks about this, and I don't know enough about art history. It's one of the things that I want to delve into too. But I've always wondered, even with just the traditional arts, without a benefactor, an audience, or someone paying for it, commissioning it, or even before sort of commercial times, like, painting, depicting a hunt, the classic prehistoric thing of depicting a hunt on a cave wall. This relationship between the creator, so like whatever the inspiration is, the creator and an audience is required for it to exist. So if you buy a camera, you take shutter actuations, even digital, and you don't even upload your SD card or your compact flash card, where the fuck, in the old days, XD and all that shit, Sony's annoying proprietary card. And then it just never, you don't even look at it. It just exists digitally as ones and zeros. I don't think anybody could ever do that. And B, I don't think it has any value, even as a practice. I mean, I might be wrong. Like, you bring up this idea of the walk, so it makes me think I'm wrong about this. But
I don't know. Like, I think maybe the photo itself has no value, but the act of it does have value, because it's like you saw something that, I don't know, maybe impacted you on an emotional level or a mental level, just like, this looks like this can line up with this type of thing, right? There's value in the act itself, but the act is like different from the result, right? So, but then if you look at it like 10 years into the future, that might have value, that result. But all I know is that at the time, pressing the button had an act, like the act itself had value for the person doing it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how one of the sort of differences between you and I is, I don't think I've ever seen you out anywhere without some form of camera on you. Whereas I will intentionally not bring my camera for, and look, any time I'm with my son, anytime I'm with my wife, because so when you were talking about the act of hitting the shutter has a personal value, I was like, yeah, like that makes sense. But then I also think, like, is that the distinction between, like, let's say an experiential memory and then recording it on a devices? So like if I climb, I used to hike a long time ago, so if I hit a mountain peak or a cliff edge, I have an amazing experience, right? Like it's, like lifting, when you're doing the act of exercise, experiencing is different than photographing it, for sure. But experiencing it is a bit fleeting and up to a lot of bias in remembering what that moment is.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think photography breaks that and is able to capture those moments? Or do you think photography is a bit illusory? Because I suspect, for example, if you're hanging out with your boys without a camera, it's a fundamentally different mindset than when you have your camera near you.
Maybe. That's a good point. I don't know, like, because I have done both, right?
Of course. Yeah.
I don't know, like, you're right that, like, when we experience something that's fleeting or whatever, right? Like, you're having a good time, you obviously want to have a record of it, right? But I don't know, like, I think it's to intentionally not bring a camera with you. I guess it's it depends on the person, right? Like nowadays, I would be okay with not bringing a camera and just be like, oh, like I saw this, right? And it'll just be in like my head. But I don't know. I feel like a camera, like having a camera with you, is just that extra step that kind of solidifies what you saw. I don't know, man. You got me thinking too hard.
And this is my problem. I think this is what's going to make these. If I can continue these conversations, I'm sure a lot of people will be frustrated with me. But you know, I'm picturing. This is so biased and unfair, but I'm picturing, like, for example, something very simple. Like, I go to the park and I take a walk. And yesterday we were out, and there's a little river stream, the Elba River, and there's these geese on it, and you know, they're trying to hit it, right? It's like mating season, and I'm hearing goose calls. I've never heard these tones before, because these dudes are like, you know, they're trying to tell these women what's up. And classic bird nature thing, the female geese don't want anything to do with it, so it's like this chase and this like thing. So it's this experience, and I remember it. Whether my memory is accurate in a factual or measurable way, it's probably not. I mean, I'm noticing things that I interpret as part of my own narrative. But if I feel like if I had brought my camera with me, that relationship would have been fundamentally different. I don't know if I would have noticed the geese, because I might have been distracted by, especially like, for example, with me, you know, I don't know why I like geometrical things, and so maybe it would have been spending time on the other side of the bike path where the blocked off playground is, with, you know, with all the caution tape. Who the fuck knows? But even if I was on the riverbed and I had whatever camera, whatever lens I had with me, and I see these geese chasing each other, you know, do I even remember the mating call, or does it become part of this act of photographing it? Am I disappointed later when I either chimp or put it in my computer and I've missed what I remember about the situation? It creates this layer and this process around it, which is why early on I stopped bringing my camera out when I take my kid to the park, because then I end up not playing with him. You know, it's like, and it's not all like, you still play with your kid, but then once they're doing something cool, you're like chasing your shit, because you're like, well, this is something I gotta record. It's part of me being a photographer. And so, like, when I talk about you always having a camera, I don't mean in a negative sense. It's why I always talk about you to other people as a capital PH photographer, because it's, at least in that era that we were hanging out, it's endemic, and it's not endemic. It's encompassing of who you were in that moment. Like, everything at that time, you were fucking showing up downtown on 20 minutes because you just had this compulsion to take photographs on a lunch break. I mean, that's not a normal approach, Alvin. That's like, you know, most people are way too stressed about, you know, not getting fired to take those chances. And whoever you are now, it doesn't, you know, it's not reflective of who you are now. I think it's interesting because that's the kind of world that I'm stuck in, is both what is like you're talking about. I think it's great, like the act of walking out, and then the act of having this camera, and then the act of taking pictures, and then invariably showing the pictures either to yourself or somebody. That's one part. And the other thing that I always want to know is, what is that process effect on culture? Because I think I don't know. I think it's different than painting. I think it's different than writing. I think it's different than anything we've done in human history. There's something, I think it's poisonous. Yeah. I'm hating on it a little bit. I love doing it. And I'm sitting here testing out my camera's shitty ISO. So I just got it set at 6400, and I just take random pictures in my bedroom. I haven't even looked at them yet, but my experiment right now for myself is to get over, like you're talking about, this technological thing that I can't have noise, and it has to be sharp, and it has to be in focus. I just want to take 10,000 shitty pictures of my bedroom with as much of the, fucking extreme end of my, everybody hates on the micro four thirds sensor, and just to see what happens. And like you, I look back at the stuff that I've been shooting, and I'm like, I don't know. Like even ones that I kind of like, I'm like, I'm not gonna put this on Instagram or anywhere. I don't want to make a print and try to sell this shit. It's like that tone has changed for me too. But with that, for me, it's this conversation I want to start about. Is that a reflection about me? Is it a reflection about you, or is there something bigger?
I don't know, man. I think whatever you photograph should be. I think photography, well, the act of photographing itself should be personal to the photographer first and foremost, unless you're like doing it for a job. But yeah, like if you're not like a pro photographer and you're really passionate about taking pictures, I think it should be personal first and foremost, always. That has to be number one, because in the end, the photos are not gonna have meaning to anyone else except to the photographer. And if they don't mean anything to you, then they're, I don't know, to me they'd be worthless, whether it's a good picture or not. And that's where I'm stuck at right now, and that's where I'm like, oh, street photography kind of sucks. That's why I always refer to my photographs now as like personal documentary, because at least it means something to me, and I can keep them and not worry about how other people are gonna view them, right? And I can print them at my own discretion, and I don't have the need to share them. And they don't even need to be like a certain genre, right? Like they can be like a landscape or portrait, or like some bullshit like sewage on the ground or whatever, right? If it's personal, then like, yeah, that's number one, because the photographs that I find the most interesting are the personal ones. Like, you look at all the best projects, like The Americans by Robert Frank. Like, he wasn't out to like, he didn't have an agenda. Well, he did, but like he was viewing America through like how he thought, right? And he got scrutinized for it, right? And then you look at another personal project, Minutes to Midnight. Well, all of Trent Park's work, A Christmas Tree, Dream Life, Minutes to Midnight. Man, like those are the type of pictures that shine through. Whereas if you look at every Instagram famous photographer right now, like it's the same type of fucking work that all the masters have done like years ago. Like, there's nothing new to the table, and there's no like personal vision to it, right? And like that's fine if I don't view it the same way they might, right? But like, what's gonna happen when they're over street photography? It's not gonna mean anything. It doesn't touch with the photographer at an emotional level, like the person who took it, right? So does that have any worth? I don't know. I don't think so.
I think you brought up, this idea of commercialization, and how maybe that's where this line starts to become very murky. When you speak about personal projects and making it personal to yourself, I mean, I'm like nodding my head, because that's a powerful starting point. And I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on that, just because there's this effect that I keep thinking I'm aware of, that maybe I'll say I'm being told to look at the world a certain way. I think that's through photography. So whether it's advertising, marketing, social media, whether it's refined professional, sort of editorialized and controlled sort of, propaganda, or the reverse, which is still propaganda, but there's like, windows in, like I was being a dick about, like, windows into the donut I ate this morning, and look at how bling I am eating at this restaurant kind of messaging, whether it's full of malicious intent or just part of the system, the cultural diaspora, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But, and I'm definitely too sensitive to that stuff. I'm always hyper aware of what's going around me. I mean, I wonder, I don't know, the more photographers I'll talk to, and we'll see if this might just be something that makes people photographers, because you just get so sensitive to what's happening around us that, like, you notice things, right, that are external.
Well, that's what most photographers are at the root of all things. They're reactionary, right? Because when you see something, you react to it, you take a picture, right? Or if you want to do like a project, it's mainly out of like a reaction. Like you're compelled to, not because you thought like, oh hey, maybe I'll think of this, just because it might be a good project, but you attack it because because you're reacting to the situation at hand.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think and that's how I view like all the best photographs. Like, it wasn't like thought of. It was like what's that one, Gary Winogrand? So Gary Winogrand took a photo of like some statue in LA, and Robert Frank took the same photo from a different perspective. And the difference that Gary Winogrand talked about it, he said, the picture that I made was made. The picture he made happened, right? So like there's like, when you look at it, you get like, when I first saw it in the book, The Americans, I had like a sense like something happened here, like something caused Robert Frank to like take a picture, and I don't know what it is, but like I feel it too. Like I'm reacting to that picture, and I would do it the same way. Like I would react to it, that same scenario that he saw, maybe in the same fashion, you know, instead of like thinking about lines lining up. And you know what? Like some photographers think that way, and that's fine. Like they like to play games like that, and that's a totally valid approach.
You know, I think what the other thing I was thinking of earlier is, you know, we're talking about people using historical photographers in this scenario, either to develop themselves or to emulate them or to be inspired by them. But a lot of, you know, the first generation guys didn't have anything, maybe other than classical art or form, which I'm not even sure how many of, I'll call them your heroes, because I just don't study enough, come from art backgrounds or discover the technology of photography separately to whatever they're doing in their lives at the time. And so that idea of being in the moment, of happening, and defining sort of what we would consider to be powerful, intuitive, and expressionist art through photography, that for me is this ideal period. Because when I look at stuff even outside the content, without the write-up of this is the first time they used this type of, you know, camera, or the first time somebody had a camera in a war thing, or the first time someone flashed a bulb in a, you know, pedestrian's face, whatever the stories around it, you know, when you see some of those pictures, you get caught because you put it great. It's like you have the sense that something happened, whether I'm ever meant to understand what it was becomes irrelevant. I think where I start to get stuck is the next generation after the concept of propaganda and politicization and context has changed. So like, you know, like your photograph, let's say the magazine piece, and we have the, what was the opening picture? Like the ATM and the person's, I don't even know what you saw to make that photograph. But if that's suddenly put in an article, not of your writing to express your fascination with Gary Winogrand, but in a, right, like Financial Post piece about some, you know, right-wing shit about how this is how Democrats want, you know, they want free money and they're carrying away our fucking banks and shit, right? Which is a very easy jump to make, actually, once you just put an epithet or a description on it. I think that's where I'm worried that, and again, this is being too sensitive about how other people see things. I think what you're describing is the art of photography, the approach, the personal thing. What I'm scared of is that social media and where we're at now, and it's why I think everybody distrusts photographs. It's hard to look at a photograph anymore, for me, and see something pure and just assume that this is, never mind the word candid, but like you're talking about, that this is something that happened as opposed to something that's been manufactured. And
well, you can never really tell, like, ever. even in like previous photos, not without context anyway, right? And it's like those could have been lies too, right?
Actually, like Costas at Resolve has that series. He was telling about this photographer that would recreate moments that he took candidly with art, and then maybe have some irony or whatever in there. But you know, and this is the weird thing about art, man. Like, I don't know if this is a modern thing. I need to research more about historical forms of art, and even like Da Vinci's, you know, some people talk about how there's so much implied sarcasm and sort of irony and subversive intent in his imagery, which I don't understand, because I look at it at a very topical level. And so, you know, maybe this is something that persists through human experience in all art forms. But
probably. Look at Andy Warhol stuff, right?
That's the same generation that I lose faith in photography. This sort of like post-war pop art fucking commercialization of art, where an artist became a celebrity and a cult hero and an idol. This thing post 1900s is where it happens to be when photography is born, or at least as we practice it now, and that's the space that I'm stuck at. So that's a great comparison. This is the exact thing. The Campbell's soup, fucking all that shit, where you need a description to explain to you why it's an important image. At least I do. I still love all the surrealist stuff and abstract art, but now I don't know. I mean, sometimes they're visually stunning, and sometimes if I don't read the essay or the pamphlet that comes with it, I don't understand why it's worshipped.
Well, it's okay to think that it's bullshit. I think for you maybe you just got to do a reset, man, like a hard reset. Just like start from ground. If I could, I would 100% do it, but I can't because it's hard, right?
Yeah, speaking of projects, it would be interesting. I mean, I don't even know what a reset looks like anymore. We're so influenced not just by our experiences, but now like it's the irony of photography. There's a record, right?
Get away from like anything related to photography or art. Do something else for.
Is that possible though?
It could be. I mean, that's I'm practicing that right now. I'm not really. I looked at my photo books for the first time yesterday in months, and I just started slowly taking pictures. But it's not like street photos. They're just family pics, right? Just to get like practice in. Yeah, and then you kind of just gotta not look at other people's work, really.
I will say turning off social media has been great for that.
Yeah.
But it's also spurred this conversation because my brain can't get away from it. Visually and let's call it artistically or whatever. You're right. It's been great to kind of just disconnect from the outside world, but my inside world, I can't get away from this idea that I need to pick up a camera again, and that some image will be manufactured at some point, whether candidly or through my digital processing. It's become definitive.
Do you enjoy it then? Because that's the important part. Because if you don't enjoy it, then
this is the problem
why
too.
pain yourself?
Going back, maybe this would be a good wrap up. Going back to talking about the newsletter and this writer about the act of walking and how it's tied into photography. One of the reasons, for example, I liked hanging out with you, other than you being a walking encyclopedia about photographic concepts that I just don't understand, but I learned a lot just in casual conversation from you, was that it gave me a chance to walk, and particularly at the beginning, I didn't give a fuck what I was taking pictures of. It was just like you were talking about, like these happenings occur, whether I understood why I needed to take a picture, whether they were any good, fell by the wayside, and just kind of being out and in a photographer's way participating in the world. I'm not out there handing out pamphlets trying to change the world. You become this sort of observer and recorder. Nowadays, I don't know anymore. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, like I said, I'm trying to do this high ISO thing because on my YouTube algorithm, this master photographer is talking about how we're too obsessed with digital sharpness, but we're losing sight of the composition. And it just made me think, like, I'm so scared to push my ISO on my tiny sensor past, let's say, 800 for fear that this grain will destroy. And I'm like, why? Like, what the fuck's going on with me? And so, like you're saying, there's a reset. And so, like, I'll walk around the bedroom here because it's dark and shady, and I'll take terrible pictures. But, there's some fun in that. But that's the limit right now. I'm like caught because if I sit down on the computer and look through my back catalog, if I want to play with something and build an image, if I want to do anything, I'm caught. It's one of the reasons why I'm not doing it very often. And definitely one of the reasons why I haven't published anything. Even the stuff that's on the Instagram, I built those images like more than a year ago. They just or on these sort of weaker, I need attention days. I mean, that was December, but I was like, I got to throw something on here just to prove that I'm alive. And now I just don't care. Yeah.
You know what though? Like what you're going through, that's part of the process, man. Yeah. But just trust it. No, like, because in the end, like nothing's gonna change if you force things. Right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Right. So just trust the process, really, because I'm going through it right now, and you like see things the way they are. Like in the end, you'll see things the way they are, and whether you go back or not, or like move forward with your photo block. If you go back, you'll just repeat the process again. Maybe you might move forward. You just gotta trust it, man.
All right, let's call that a wrap for today. I think whenever we can get back together, one of the things I want to talk about, I think, is this compositional idea of what is attractive about an image. I know you have very strong opinions about stuff like that.
I don't even know if I can answer that anymore.
Exactly, which is why I think it'd be a cool conversation, because I think that the basic tropes are one thing, but you brought up being, because I find this too, I probably talk too much about George Weber, but like he's awesome, but like I had this feeling, because I didn't know who he was until I met him, and then I was at the camera store book section, and I opened up one of his works. I don't know if it was Badlands or the other thing, but I had that moment. So I think it was Badlands that the beginning half is written by somebody else, and I skipped through that because I don't have time to read. And then I opened up just randomly one of the landscape photographs, and I got stuck because intuitively, it's not like I took out a measuring thing and looked for ratios of thirds or like measured the dynamic range. I don't know. It was just, you get stuck. And some of his photos, or even I've since with the Magnum contact sheet book or Robert Frank's American. I mean, I don't own it. Or when you've lent and given me that Japanese photographic magazine. Was it Aperture? No, Aperture, but it had the thing about Japanese photographers. That intuitive sense, because I don't measure it either. But then when I build stuff and edit it, I'm hyper aware of those things. So it'd be interesting to talk about that.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
We'll leave it for next talk, though.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good weekend, man. It's good seeing you.
You too.
All right.
Yeah, good seeing you too.
All right, man.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
From print ads to digital marketing to willing participation in digital culture paradigms, photographers in particular cannot seem to separate themselves in their work from the work of others. For me, it's one of the crucial problems with photography, at least as it exists right now. Whatever its original power and purpose, its proliferation has developed into a numbing force, one where it feels many people get caught up in. In short, the difference between mimicry and innovation, even perhaps the question of whether these are in fact separate or inclusive. To act, to pursue one's own development, to move into that discomfort and pain and not shy away from external cultural pressure. Instead, to flourish there with independent and critical reflection. For me, these are some lasting concepts I got from reading Nietzsche years ago, albeit in a drunken stupor. So basically, I'm probably completely off the mark on this. Nevertheless, the world and photography's place in it has become very diffuse and fragmented, and with it, the motivation to find oneself and grow oneself within it. Whether it trends to something particularly evil becomes almost irrelevant. The first task for me is to recognize this, and then to search for that discomfort to continue to grow. Finding inspiration in the work of others has value only if that mimicry and study lead to a new evolution and experimentation. New challenges to an older accepted worldview. If this process stops at mimicry, it dies there. These are dramatic words, inspired by dramatic philosopher Nomad, who apparently went insane due to a tumor growing behind his eye and resulting dementia. Still, he's got a lot of pretty neat aphorisms, even if they are hard to digest. Thanks to Alvin for connecting me to Brian Formal's blog, Way of the Walk, and for the time to discuss my being stuck here in my practice. Now, time to find a new path to walk upon and hopefully discover more.